Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Thriving LDS Singles podcast. We're so happy to have you here. Today we have Kay, your host, and Kim, my co-host. Hi, Kim.
Hello.
Hi. And today we're going to have Kim talk to us about healthy relationships, particularly an ACE study. And we're going to consider the fact that childhood trauma affects how we have relationships now as adults. So Kim's done a bit of research into this, and so we're going to hand it over to Kim. Go, Kim.
All right. And we should probably mention I'm in Utah, Salt Lake City. And so I'm recording in a different place and my camera looks all wonky and all the things. So sorry about that. But I left all my good equipment
The
at
other thing
home.
we should mention is Kim's been putting this to the test by having lots of dates in Utah. So
I have been on a few.
Yeah, been a few dates. So it's very interesting to see how this is showing in her daily.
Impacting me.
Yeah.
All right. So the first thing I thought was important to talk about was the ACE study, because we should all be familiar with the ACE study, not only because we maybe have experienced trauma, but also because many of us are divorced or have been widowed at an early age when our children were young. And so potentially maybe this could impact our children. So not just thinking about it from the perspective of how it impacts us in our relationships, but also may impact our children. So along those lines, the ACE, if you haven't heard of the ACE study, it stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. And it started out, it was, Kay and I were looking it up. It did start in 95. I have in my brain that it was a long time ago, but I guess actually now that is a long time ago. It was almost 30 years ago.
It feels like it was just last year, doesn't it?
I know. I said to Kay, it can't be that soon. But anyway, it was done by Kaiser Permanente, and it was one of the biggest studies of its kind. I think there were maybe over 17,000 people or 17 in the study. So they had a ton of data, which is why the outcomes and what they found is so important and is used in the ACE study is referenced all over the place, certainly in behavioral health. But anyway, it consisted of 10 questions that they asked. And the questions were around childhood experiences related to abuse, neglect, or household dysfunction. And household dysfunction was like alcoholism or a parent with a mental health disorder or something to that effect. And so look at those 10 questions. Kay and I were talking about it, and I think we both decided we could probably have yes in all three of those categories for our childhood. And what that means is when they did the study, over 64% experienced at least one ACE. And so really that's probably pretty typical. And one of the questions is, did you have a parent, were your parents divorced and did one leave the home in your childhood, in your youth? So we know that that's pretty common nowadays, 50%. So we would expect that there would be at least one ACE, but probably a lot more than that, because when you grow up in that kind of a family, then all of a sudden your mom has to work. And so she's not around. And then you might be experiencing things related to neglect. So it just impacts a bunch of other areas potentially. But anyway, 17% in that study, and this would probably be much higher for sure. And they continue to do ACE studies. So I'm sure there's data showing what current percentages are, but 17% experienced 4 ACEs or more. So that's a pretty significant number. And when they started, the study was originally looking at why people with obesity kept gaining the weight back after they had lost the weight and learned the behaviors. And so what they discovered is that there was a very high correlation between obesity and high ACE scores. And not only was there a high correlation between obesity, but many other health disorders. And that's what I have right here on the screen is some of the findings. So people that had 6 or more are twice as likely to have cancer or a chronic disease. So really, in summary, and you can look through all the this data in detail, if you have high ACE scores, you are more apt to have more suicide attempts, to have struggles with depression and anxiety. PTSD is common, and shorter life expectancy. So when I first learned about this study and knowing that my ACE score was high, I became very passionate about studying, well, how do I change that? How do I fix this? And because our bodies are divine, God-given bodies, we are blessed with the ability to improve or change our brains. They also have proven now that brains that have been exposed to long periods of trauma or reoccurring trauma, so like in an abusive home and those kinds of things where they never get to a point where they can feel safe and recover and learn to regulate themselves as children. So in that case of prolonged stress, they have started calling it CPTSD. I don't know that that's an actual official diagnosis as of late, but anyway, whenever you have had those kind of prolonged exposures to stress like that, it physically changes your brain because your brain has to shift to being hyper aware of everything that's going on and being hyper vigilant of your surroundings to help protect you and keep you safe, right? Always looking for, am I going to get abused or am I going to do something wrong or whatever? And so in those cases, you end up actually having physical changes to your brain. And the good news is our brains can change. There is neuroplasticity until the day we die. And neuroplasticity means that our brains change and can grow. And so you can shift to learning good, healthy behaviors, but not without a lot of hard work. So that's the bottom line. It's important to understand ACEs. Typically people, even if you have had exposure to one or more of these, if you have a really good supportive parent or two parents as you've gone through some form of abuse or trauma of some kind, typically those children fare pretty well. But if you don't have that good support system, then you probably are one of the more likely to have chronic illness and a shorter lifespan. So I don't know, Kay, what's your thoughts just on seeing that data? What do you think?
Well, I mean, I guess I know that because I've lived it, and it's taken me till now to sort of reverse the damage that was done in my early life. But I guess that's the big message I'd like to give, is that it can be changed.
Yes.
Like, yeah, sure it does. And, it does affect our teenage, early 20s and things. You can see it come out. But that doesn't mean you have to stay there. You can reverse it, and you actually can reverse it in the brain. You can actually see it changing in the brain.
Yes.
And bring sort of that non-stressed brain back.
There you go. Yes. Another important thing I think to think about is, because if you've had prolonged exposure to stresses like that and your brain has changed, typically those children that have grown up in those kinds of environments have a harder time making decisions and managing stress in their life. So they're triggered easier. And we use that word triggered all over the place these days. But in relation to this, just know that they have a lower tolerance. And so those are the kinds of behaviors that we can change and improve on and create a higher tolerance, as well as, build more resilience in people. So that's the good news.
That's the good news. It can be fixed.
Yes. Yes.
Because you can't go back and relive your childhood, but you can fix it now.
Yeah. Yep. And so the next thing I wanted to talk about in relation to that, and we have talked about this in previous episodes, are the attachment styles. Because if you are getting exposed to some of those ACEs, odds are you probably don't have a secure attachment style because you didn't have a good support system and secure relationships where you were able to feel safe. And when you don't have that, you develop unhealthy attachment styles. And I have, so secure attachment is when you have learned to regulate yourself and feel safe. And I was just going to go over these quick because, like I said, we have talked about these before. And anxious attachment you can see as having a fear of rejection, a tendency to please people, etc. So I'm very familiar with that style. And then the next, and then there's a couple other styles. The dismissive avoidant, which is when you had absent parents or when you suffered a lot of neglect and you have to rely on yourself for safety. So you become dismissive, like, I don't need people. I'm just going to take care of myself. And then fearful avoidant is really a combination, the combined of all of those things. So it's very common to have an unhealthy attachment style, or it's not even correct to say unhealthy, but one of these, a dismissive, anxious, or fearful avoidant attachment style rather than a secure attachment style. And so that's another thing to be aware of and to think about, especially in your relationships, because these attachment styles typically don't show up unless there's some kind of stress or you're feeling ill at ease for some reason in the relationship. And then that's when these behaviors start to show up.
I think so when you're in a situation where you need to be vulnerable, which is, you're falling in love and sharing some deep thoughts, or, and then the person doesn't phone you the next day. So you're in a vulnerable position and you're sort of, and
that's
so
a really good example.
I don't know if I want to, and it can be that, you're in a good relationship and it's you that's like trying to back away from something that's good, because it is hard to be vulnerable when you've been through this stuff.
Yeah. Very good. And so that leads us to the last kind of slide that I wanted to talk to in this episode. I don't know how many minutes in we are, but and we have also shown this slide before, but I just really wanted to focus on it because when we're in those vulnerable states, like Kay said, and there's something feeling a little out of sorts in a relationship, then that's where this model, the relationship attachment model, comes into play. And I think this attachment model is really important in all relationships, because what our goal should be is to create a sense of safety in a relationship in all four of these areas, and they're progressive. So first, the getting to know somebody, and perhaps when you're getting to know somebody, and I have the definitions over here on the side so you can kind of see what the definition of what that means to get to know somebody. But when you're getting to know somebody, if both of you are feeling safe sharing information, that's awesome. You've moved through that kind of first step in the relationship model. And Kate, chime in
I was actually at the Institute Christmas breakup party on a couple of nights ago and talking to some of the young kids. Love Institute age, but one of the girls was talking about she'd broken up with the old boyfriend that I knew her with, and she had a new one, and she said that her parents were concerned about her and things. And one of the bits of advice she had been given was, make sure you have a fight with the person while you're dating them. See how they react to a fight. And I think that's part of that no trust stuff, isn't it? It's like,
yes,
what's going to happen when they get angry? And
that's really good.
I think, especially maybe not so much now in our life, but as young adults, you go and do all these fun dates and have great time. And, you're not really seeing the person in their day-to-day life with the stresses and the problems that come in day-to-day. You just see all the fun things.
Yeah.
Whereas our dates really need to include, problems to see how they handle that.
Yeah. Yeah. I always say you have to go through all four seasons. I think some of the people we've interviewed have said, go on a road trip. And that's always a really good advice. So there's all kinds of things to kind of get to know each other better in terms of these things. But
so it's fun to go to the movies and go out to dinner and go dancing and all those fun things.
Play, yeah.
But they're probably, you need to do some other things to really get to know them.
Yeah. So as you progress from knowing to developing trust with each other. And again, each of these areas You need to feel reciprocated. You need to feel a sense of safety and also provide a sense of safety in each of these areas. So first is knowing, second is trust. So how much can you trust the person that you're with? And then the third one is relying on them. Can you rely on them? Are they, somebody that you would, I don't know, feel confident that they could come through for you in a crisis or something, and you can count on them? Do they show up on time? Little things even where you can know that you can really count on them and they're going to do what they say. And like I said, you can see the definitions over here on this side. And then next is commit. So that's how committed they are to you, right? So that is the point in time where you decide, okay, maybe we should be more exclusive in our relationship, and that's always a really big decision. We've talked, Kay, about making that one of our podcasts, right? Is how do you make that decision of when to be exclusive in a relationship or not? But so can you commit to each other, or do you feel safe in committing? So there's a strong sense of investment by both individuals, and they feel obligated to be with you. And then the final is touch. And I just really want to emphasize that because it's last. And there's really good reason for it being last, that we create a sense of safety around physical intimacy. Because if you jump ahead to that and get your hormones and everything else involved, then it's very hard to discern if you're feeling a sense of safety in these other areas, because you have too many chemical things going on you're too already involved in the relationship in a way that makes it a lot more complicated to have to discern these. So I really believe that it's wisdom why we have a law of chastity and why we say that personal intimacy is not for just everybody, because we can't be in good, healthy relationships if we don't have the ability to create safety in all these areas. And keep in mind, this model is a recurring model, like a cyclical model. So you may get to a certain level where you're holding hands at the end, and then you go to a next layer of intimacy, right? Or a next layer of getting to know the person. You share more information. Maybe it's financial information, or can I trust them with more vulnerable things? Rely on them. Are they committed to me? And then maybe the physical relationship grows from there. So it's a cyclical process, and within each step, you're helping to give safety and create safety for each other all along the way. I don't know. What do you think about that model, Kay?
I wish I'd known that when I was 18 years old. That would have been so helpful.
Yeah, for sure.
And it is. It's those hormones that just get in the way, don't they? And you sort of rush to the physical intimacy, and then it's only later on that you're going, oh, I don't really feel I can trust this person or rely on this person.
Yeah, but then you're drawn to them for some, right? So you have this conflict inside because you have the physical, you're drawn to them, but yet you have some red or yellow flags in the other areas, and it's really hard to take them into consideration at that stage.
To back away at that point, because you've made a commitment, physical commitment, and you're enjoying it, but you're starting to see the red flags, and it's a bit late.
Exactly.
So you marry them and they committed for 10 years, and then you go, no, this is not working.
Yeah. And many of us have been there, right? Sadly.
You could have figured that out in the first place if you had just gone through the steps, as you're saying, in the right order.
Yeah, exactly. So just then thinking about this and our own attachment style when things start to feel unsafe in a relationship and we want to go to our dismissive behaviors, our avoidant behaviors, our anxious behaviors, how that really can rock the boat in terms of the relationship and confuse people. Like if somebody is one kind of attachment style and the other person is the opposite of that, if somebody's avoidant and another's anxious, then the anxious one is going to be pleading with the avoidant to stay connected because that's their mode of operation to get to safety. And the avoidant is going to be withdrawing because that's their mode of creating safety for themselves. And so, and actually those two can actually be kind of attracted to each other because the dismissive can think, oh, they're pursuing me, so I must be okay. You know what I mean? Like it sends all kinds of the wrong signals. So it's really important to know kind of what your attachment style is if you don't have a secure attachment style. And then where are things in the relationship and kind of what level are you at and where you're functioning so that you can learn. All you can control is yourself. And how do you need to be regulating yourself with all of this that's going on?
I think that's really valuable because it is when you start having problems in your relationship and you're going, oh, they didn't do this and they should have said that and they didn't do that. And, it's very easy to see what they didn't do.
Yeah.
And probably the classic example was in my second marriage. I actually think it was probably a good marriage, but because I was still going through some of this stuff, and of course he had his stuff, because she said nearly everybody's got some of it.
Right. Right.
So there's always going to be that. And one of the classics was that he used to tell me how much he loved me, right? Which is a really nice thing to do, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And he was one of those guys that looks like a real masculine guy on the outside, and he was real marshmallow on the inside. And he was the romantic, and he was the lovey-dovey stuff. And it scared me. It used to always scare me. And I realized now, there was thoughts going through my head. So when he said, I love you, you're just absolutely the best, there was a thought in my head of like, does he really mean it? Is this going to last? Is he really real? This seems a bit gooey,
Yeah.
Like it was like, and so, because then he would come back with, well, you don't love me,
because you didn't reciprocate. That isn't how you.
And so I would, I know I say I love you, but he was picking up that body language of me backing away, going, whoa, this is a bit much. This is a bit tough.
Yeah.
And so he was feeling that and feeling rejected. Yeah. And so he would then act out some of his stuff of like, well, stuff you then,
Yeah.
And you go, we'd get ourselves into these tangles.
Yeah.
Which was really unfair. Example. Yeah, which was so unfair. And healing myself and knowing that I'm lovable was such an important step, because then when someone says, I love you, you go, oh, yes, I'm lovable.
Yeah. And you trusted it.
And you trust it.
I'm the same way for a little bit different reason. So when somebody compliments me, it makes me feel unsafe, because then I think, oh, I owe this. Like I have this sense, because I grew up kind of in this really manipulative, transactional love kind of environment where I give you this and then you do this for me. And so if somebody was kind or loving or did something for me, then in my brain, it meant, oh, now I am beholden or owing, or I would be suspect, like you said, because I wouldn't trust it. Like, what do you want from me? What is it you're trying to get from me? And so when you learn that it potentially could mean none of those things, that's the story you're telling yourself. That's what I always say. The story I'm telling myself. I think that's a Brene Brown ism, but the story I'm telling myself is, and then ask yourself, what is that? What am I telling myself that means? And really get connected to that, and then recognize, like you say, I am lovable no matter what, and be feeling confident and secure and safe. Then you can come from a much more comfortable place, and you can ask a direct question, or potentially even have a conversation of, the story I'm telling myself when you tell me you love me is dot, 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 dot. And then and have a good, healthy conversation about it and learn from each other instead of get into the getting and protecting behaviors that we've talked about before, where you're trying to get them to respond the way you want, or removing yourself to protect yourself because it doesn't feel safe to you. So
that's that sort of rely, isn't it? That trust.
yes.
And then rely on them, that you can have a conversation and say, when you say I love you, believe it or not, I'm questioning that.
Yeah, because the story I'm telling myself is I can't trust that.
Yeah. And so that's what I meant by before when I said, like, that's a very vulnerable position to go to someone and say, oh yeah, can you, like,
Yeah.
this is what I feel. And that's, I find that's so hard to do, to share that sort of in-depth feeling. And I guess that's the message, though, we'd like to say, is that this can all be healed.
Yes.
Can get there, because we have to learn that to love ourselves. And I think I saw some comments in our group, our Facebook group, about what does it mean to love yourself?
Yeah.
And I thought they were really good questions. So, like, on how do you do that?
Yeah.
And I think for people who have been, especially if you've got a number of those ACEs, you probably do need professional help. You probably do need to go talk to someone.
For sure.
Because it's so hard to work out in your brain what's the truth and what is your story.
Yeah.
Because obviously there are people you can't rely on. Like they are people you could be running from.
Yeah, there are people in the world we can't trust, sadly. So
yeah, that's right. So it could be that you've got good intuition and you're right, or it could be this internal story. And I think you need a third person, because if you try and do it in your own brain, you just go round and round and round and round, and your brain just gets mucked.
Yeah, and I'm saying to myself, is that my trauma speaking, or is that my am I being inspired by it can get all muddled and confusing. The other thing is, the more healing we do, the safer environment we can create for others, because we feel
Say that again.
Because when the more healing that we do on ourselves, the more equipped we are to create a sense of safety for somebody else, because we feel secure and confident, and what they say doesn't threaten us or scare us in any way. And so we can stay grounded and okay. And that creates a safe environment for people to share and be vulnerable with us. And so the more healing that we do, the safer people feel with us.
Very, very important, because even if we don't want intimate relationships anymore, we've got relationships with all sorts of people, including our children. Who, because they've been raised by not perfect parents, they're going to have some of this, even though we did a better job than our parents did. And I always say that to my kids. Hey, I might have got it wrong, but I did better than my parents.
Well, and speaking of that, I actually, just because I'm here visiting family, and my son and I had a disagreement, and later he sent me a text and he said, thank you for being the person that I can feel that, it makes me cry, the person I can feel that sense of safety, because I know a lot of children don't feel that with their parents. And that, that's really, really important to me, because there's a lot of things I didn't do right when they were little, for sure. And if I can't create that sense of safety so they can share those with me, and we can own it and work through it with each other now, then that's just so much damage to a relationship. That's not why we're here, I don't think.
That's right. And I've had the same experience with my children. They come to me and they might tell me something that I did really, really wrong when they were a child.
Yeah.
Or where I've hurt them. And to be able to take that and not feel like you're being attacked, but to accept that, yes, I did things wrong. And my daughter was quite clear to me. She said, I don't need you to give excuses or explain or anything. I just need you to say, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yep.
And I'm like, what a mature thing.
Acknowledge it.
Yeah. And she's right. And that made such a difference to our relationship and to her life.
Yeah.
I've watched her change as our relationship's been getting better. Her relationships in her life are getting better as well, including her relationship with herself. So it's never too late to fix this stuff.
Yeah.
Sure. she went through the divorce, her parents screaming at each other and her parents getting divorced and then being taken away from her father, which is the one that she was talking to me about. And I thought I had done a great thing because we did a big trip around Australia for a couple of years. I thought it was a great thing. She said, but you took me away from my dad and my siblings, my older siblings. And I'm like, oh, yeah, didn't even think of that. Like, I thought I was doing something good. So it wasn't even that I was bad.
Right.
But the hurt that she said, but I took her and her brother, the two youngest.
Yeah.
And she said, but, we had to leave the siblings and then we didn't even go back to our friends. And, it was really heartfelt that she'd been traumatized by that. And I went, oh, wow.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So,
well, and then the last maybe parting thing is we can rotate or shift the ACE scores. Instead of them getting worse, we can make them better. And part of that is creating safe environments for our children, being a good support system, creating strong communities and outreach. I mean, like community, and we have that in the gospel, which is so awesome if we can find good, healthy ways to leverage that and create that strong sense of community and those good, healthy support systems. We can change. There's hope. We can be hopeful about shifting those ACE scores to get lower instead of increase.
Absolutely. And that's where Jesus' atonement comes in, because one of the ways to heal is we have to forgive those people. And so it's easy with my daughter and I. We live quite close. We have, we can actually have those conversations. For our parents and things, it might be harder. Maybe they've died, or you don't have a relationship where you're with them, but you can still learn to forgive them. That doesn't mean you agree that everything they did was right. It doesn't mean that they, maybe you don't even need to have a relationship with them now. But the forgiveness is about letting go of those hurts and angers and traumas inside you. And that's such a powerful thing to do.
Yeah.
And I know that because that's part of my healing, was letting that go.
Me too.
And
we've done earlier podcasts on it too. So you can always look at those on forgiveness.
And just think of, like, I think of my mother in the next life, and she died nearly 30 years ago now. So she's been in the next life for a fair while. And she's learning this stuff. She's learning about love. She's learning to heal those things. So, the person that I meet will be a very different person than the one that left this life.
Yeah, it's a really good point.
And so we can forgive them, because we're going to see this person that's had 30 years of that ultimate love that's been coming in.
Yeah, I like that thought. All right. I think
I still feel a little bit like, I don't know if
a little offish, standoffish about that. Could I
standoffish
fully embrace her? And
I'm still not 100% sure about that. But I certainly, my father's still alive, so it's been, we've been able to do something. And because he's now in his 90s, he's probably looking back on his life a little bit.
Yeah.
And we talked about one of the early incidences when I was about 12. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry.
So a good story about fathers. I was telling a friend this that has a young daughter, but fathers are always fathers. So I'm 60 and you mentioned I've been going on some dates, and I told my dad, I was talking about one of the dates, that he's a little bit flirty, I said. And my dad, bless his heart, he's 83. He said, well, do you want me to come with you? I was like, well, I don't know if taking a chaperone would be appropriate. And he was all ready to go. And then the next question was, do you have pepper spray? I thought, you never quit being a dad when you're an awesome dad.
Being a dad. Isn't that beautiful?
Cute.
So take all that on, because that's what he's saying is, I love you. I care about you. You're important to me.
Yeah.
Sort of like, yeah, it'd be nice if you'd said that when I was 16. That's good too.
Exactly.
And yeah, we never stop being a parent. We can still help. So we can help our children through this. We can help them understand this. You know, my children certainly talk to me a bit about their relationships and some of their struggles. And, you know, I know stuff.
Through the School of Hard Knocks and other important learnings, other people.
Yeah, that's right. I've done the educational school and the School of Hard Knocks. And actually, a client yesterday said she loves working with me because she said, I know you've got such a lifetime of wisdom.
Yeah.
So the qualifications are great, but the lifetime of wisdom is really valuable. She's dealing with children who are sort of 18 to 20, and she's like tearing her hair out. So, yeah, I know stuff about that.
Exactly. That is awesome.
So, Kim, that's fantastic to learn all about that, and for us to be aware of what's going on inside ourselves, so that as we're, you know, dating and looking at getting close relationships, looking at these relationships with our parents, with our children, and of course with friends, but yeah, particularly in the dating world, to be aware of what's really going on and to start working with the know and the trust before we get to the cute stuff of touching, which is so much more fun. Oh.
And will be so much more wonderful, I guess. I don't know, a good word for that. If you get through those other phases, if you
get through those other
cycle.
things.
So much more rewarding.
So much more rewarding. So thank you very much, Kim, and hope everybody's enjoyed that. And by all means, ask us questions. Remember that we've got a Facebook group by the same name, Thriving LDS Singles. Yeah. And that's a great place to ask us questions, say, hey, I'd like more information on that, get to know us a bit more. Thanks, Kim.
Love that.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.